Zidane Danny, Electro Ninja here, and welcome back to Electro Ninja's Lab. In today's video of Miraculous History, we are going to be looking at the crafting of the Miraculouses, the Miraculous Boxes, and the creation of the Guardians. As this covers quite a lot of the history of the Miraculous, going up to probably the end of the main story, we are going to. This is going to be the last video where I, as Electro Ninja, will be talking to you directly. However, you can expect that next week we will begin talking about the Lion Miraculouses, as well as one of their users, Hercules. And that is going to still be within this series, but it's also going to be thanks to James Johnson and History Tonight. But anyways, let's get into the actual story. Miraculous. How exactly were the Miraculouses crafted? As I mentioned last time, the Kwamis spent a lot of their time traveling the cosmos. After that, we found out that the Kwamis made their way to Earth. However many there are really doesn't matter. However, we do know that there are quite a lot of Kwamis, and by this point, all of the Kwamis would have existed. And while it's obvious that certain things won't be exact, by the point that we are going to with the Miraculous being created, by this point all of the Miraculouses would exist, well, all of the Kwamis would exist, and there won't be any more created after the creation of the Miraculouses. So how exactly were these Miraculouses created? Well, each of the different groups of the Kwamis would come together into specific groups. The ones that would head off to China, the ones that would head off to Europe, the Transylvanian monsters, the African Kwamis, the Australian Kwamis, the North and South American Kwamis, the Antarctic Kwamis, and of course, the Sea Kwamis. These huge groups of Kwamis would go to these segments of the world searching for someone who can put them in their place. The leaders of these Kwamis would know it's too dangerous for us to be left unchecked. Except, of course, the Transylvanian Kwamis, who instead wanted to find someone who could enhance their abilities, make them stronger. And whether that means that they have to work alongside humans, that doesn't matter to them as much as causing as much chaos and destruction as they possibly can. So, these Kwamis searched out for crafters for their Miraculouses. Obviously, they eventually found them. I'm honestly uncertain exactly how much time it took for all of these different Miraculouses to be formed. However, a good few thousand years of difference actually wouldn't surprise me at all. More than likely, a lot of the Greek Miraculouses might have been the first ones to be crafted, followed up by the Chinese ones, the African, the North American, South American, and all of these other Miraculouses would have been formed, but most likely they would have been crafted later, with the European Miraculouses being the first ones to be crafted. This is reasonable considering the fact that, depending on which universe theory you go with, a lot of the Greek history often goes back to nearly 10,000 years, to as or even more, depending on which ones you're going to believe. And if we are going to believe that that the gods the of the Greek world were these miraculous holders, then it would actually make sense for them to have been around for a much longer time than almost all of the others, with all of them giving about 5,000 years ago, with the fact that the uh, Egyptian one was actually 5,000 years ago, according to the Wikipedia article. All of these Kwamis are actually pretty hard to be certain exactly how they were formed, but most likely they would have gone off to different mages, who would then craft the miraculous jewels. But in return, the Kwamis, in return for what they were doing, the Kwamis decided to make a gift of their own to give to the mages, the very first Kwagatama, which was first introduced in Bafana when Tiki gave Marinette a gift as a miraculous present. While the mages were crafting up these new gems, the Kwagatamas were being crafted within the first Kwagatamas were being crafted within the creation equivalents of the Kwami's stomachs. Basically, taking a piece of hair or feather or whatever from each of the other Kwamis and basically forming that into the very first Kwagatama. This Kwagatama would be more powerful than any Kwagatama to come. Very magically powerful. These Kwagatamas would be given to the creators of the miraculous jewels once they had finished their job. After many hours of working and trying to create these perfect jewels, eventually the mages found a way to make these gems, and the miraculous came into being. But there would have to be a safe place for them to be stored. Luckily for them, the Kwagatamas were finally done, being gifted to these mages as basically a thank you gift. The mages found out that these jewels were extremely powerful magic and could be used to keep the Kwamis safe. Rather than taking these jewels for themselves to make them some of the most powerful wizards in the world, they instead crafted a box that would be the perfect situation for the Miraculouses to keep them safe in case of an emergency. They would place this jewel, the first Kwagatamas, into the box, and then they would put all of the miraculous jewels within them, thus making this box become the first box of the miraculouses, and making these mages the very first guardians. This would allow them to actually function as guardians. Great magics were induced, so that if at any point there was an emergency where the guardian would have to stop being a guardian, and because they knew too much, they could relinquish their ability to be the guardian, and it would wipe their mind completely, allowing the Kwamis and the holders of the Miraculouses to be in a safe position. However, there are certain disadvantages to this. Whenever they do this, the miraculous jewels would be separated from the box. Only the Kwamis would be sent in, and the miraculous jewels would become useless until returned to the Guardian, unless they were already being used by another holder of a miraculous. Meaning that the only people that would actually be well suited to become the new Guardians would be people who held a miraculous at some point, making Ladybug actually a reasonable assumption to give her the Kwami. But it also means that other situations would have been a bit challenging, to say the least. Um, Also, if the person who was chosen to be the next guardian did happen to have a Kwame that was out, that Kwame would not be sent back to the box, as it wouldn't be considered as dangerous as, say, all of the other Kwames. So, there's that. Over time, these miraculous guardians traveled the world, giving miraculouses to people who were truly good people, such as Hercules, the ancient Egyptian ladybug, and many, many more. Eventually, they would come in contact with each other, finding out that there are multiple miraculous boxes. While obviously the last two to come in contact with the rest of them being the Sea and Antarctica one, and possibly also the Australian one, they would all eventually meet up. And in order to keep all of these new Kwamis and Miraculouses safe, they all would head to a centralized location, which the best place was Tibet. It was a safe location far away from the rest of the world, but it would still give them the access that they needed to go to each of the different locations. It's not too far away from Russia, meaning that they could cross the land bridge over to North America and then head down to South America when they needed to. And it would also allow them to travel to Europe, Africa, and yes, it would take a boat to get to Australia or Antarctica, but those two places were relatively uninhabited, meaning that they were relatively safe from needing to have any miraculous holders. Antarctica, especially. And as for Australia, no big deal. As for the sea, the whole city of Atlantis was under the water, and the only people who really needed to go there would be the Atlanteans. So they could, that one miraculous box would be sent back and forth between the temple and to Atlantis or any other underwater cities, making it the best possible solution. Eventually, however, this would be the formation of the Guardians, and they would scour the world trying to find new Guardians. Usually they would probably take orphans who were good of heart, but they would also take some from the neighboring towns. This is why Fu was able to become a guardian even though he had a family. Over these many years they studied, but one thing bad happened one day. While they were training many, many guardians, they happened to bring most, if not all, of the miraculouses to one location, to Tibet, their main temple. At which point, a young, upset Master Fu created an amok named Feast that would destroy everything they had worked on. Eventually, he would save the one miraculous box, but that would be the end of miraculous holders for many years to come, until eventually he found the new ladybug and the new cat noir that we know so well. Unfortunately, that is as much of the history of the miraculouses in general that we can possibly know. While there are obviously lots of different possibilities of what exactly happened for each of the miraculous boxes and all of that, over the 5,000 years after the Egyptians, I would say that from that point on, it was the Guardians' jobs across all of the different locations to work together, and they were probably the first, basically the greatest government or whatever, to basically protect the entire world. They were practically a Justice League, but only the Guardians would ever know where exactly the Miraculouses were kept. As for the Transylvanian Miraculouses, though, these Miraculouses, or these Kwamis, were betrayed. When their mage crafted their Miraculous box, he didn't create the box the same way that the others did, so that only a Guardian could hold it, but rather he created it so that only someone of a good heart could hold this Miraculous box. And unlike the others, it would bring in all of the Kwamis every time that all of the Kwamis and all of the jewels as soon as the master said that it was time to transfer it to a new Guardian. He betrayed them to make sure that the world would be safe. While obviously he would have been betrayed multiple times, or each of the different Guardians would have been betrayed multiple times by their respective users, by the time that it would have eventually made it to the Temple of the Guardians, at that point, once they found out what exactly this Miraculous box entailed, they would have kept it secret, locked it up, in a place that no one would ever be allowed to go into. This Miraculous box was purely evil, and no Kwami should ever, and no hero or anyone should ever have to deal with these evil Kwamis ever again. And they would even probably have told all of the Guardians that would be growing up there until it was time for a lead Guardian to be picked. That box doesn't exist at all. They would tell them that there was no such thing as Kwamis of nastiness or anything like that, as basically a way to make sure that only the leader of the Guardians would ever know that such a box existed and how dangerous it truly is. Meaning that only when Feast found it would that box have even been remotely known. So, yeah, it's honestly terrifying, but that's what I think happened. But anyways, guys, tell me what you think of this theory down in the comments below. If you have any theories about who could be miraculous holders or anything else that is theory-wise, please make sure to also leave it down in the comments below. Make sure to use the hashtag #TheoryReview. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and ring that notification bell. And if you want to support the channel even more, then definitely head down to the description and check out all of our links down there, including the ways that you can support us financially and the ways that you can support us through just checking out our social medias. But anyways, guys, I have been Electric Ninja, and I'll see you guys next time. But on!